Michelle Martinko walked into the mall under glowing Christmas lights, unaware that her name would one day echo through courtrooms and crime files for nearly 4 decades. While far from the laughter and holiday music, an ordinary-looking man named Jerry Burns carried a secret that would stay buried in silence for 39 years, binding their names together in one of the most chilling cold cases the town had ever known. On December 19, 1979, the city of Cedar Rapids was glowing with Christmas lights. Store windows were decorated with red ribbons and artificial snow. Holiday music echoed through the shopping mall as families hurried to finish their last-minute gift buying. 16-year-old Michelle Martinko had spent the evening walking through those bright hallways, carrying small bags filled with presents for her loved ones. She was known as kind, cheerful, and full of plans for the future. That night felt ordinary, peaceful, and full of excitement for the coming holiday. Outside, the air was bitterly cold. Snow rested along the edges of the parking lot, reflecting the yellow glow of tall streetlights. Cars slowly pulled out one by one as the mall prepared to close. Michelle stepped through the glass doors and into the freezing night. Her breath formed pale clouds as she made her way toward her car. The lot was still busy enough to feel safe, yet empty enough to feel quiet. She unlocked her vehicle and settled into the driver's seat. What happened next remains one of the most haunting mysteries of that winter night. At some point, someone approached her car. The attack was sudden and violent, leaving no time for escape. The noise of the mall, the passing cars, and the winter wind hid the horror unfolding inside that small vehicle. By morning, the joyful feeling of the season was gone. A routine patrol officer noticed the car still sitting in the lot. Inside was a tragic scene that would shock the entire community. A simple evening of holiday shopping had turned into the beginning of a decades-long search for justice. The news spread quickly through Cedar Rapids, turning a peaceful city into a place of fear and disbelief. What had happened in the mall parking lot felt impossible to accept. A young life had been taken in a public place, during the busiest season of the year, without anyone seeing or stopping it. Families woke up to flashing headlines and radio reports that carried the same chilling message. No one knew who had done it. Parents held their children closer. Teenagers were warned not to go anywhere alone, especially after dark. The mall, once filled with laughter and holiday cheer, became a symbol of danger. Shoppers glanced over their shoulders, and the sound of footsteps in parking lots suddenly felt threatening. The sense of safety the town once trusted was gone overnight. Police worked around the clock. The crime scene was carefully examined, and every visible detail was recorded. Officers searched nearby cars, dumpsters, and snowy footprints for anything that might lead them to the killer. They believed the attacker had escaped quickly, blending into the crowd or disappearing into the winter night. The lack of clear witnesses made the case even more troubling. Investigators tried to understand the brutality of the crime. The violence suggested intense anger, but Michelle's life showed no signs of conflict or danger. She had no history of trouble and no known enemies. This made the crime feel random, which frightened the community even more. If it could happen to her, it could happen to anyone. As days passed without an arrest, fear settled deeper into the town. Candlelight vigils were held, and flowers filled the mall entrance. Grief mixed with anxiety, and one question echoed everywhere. How could someone commit such a crime and vanish without a trace? As the weeks passed, investigators began turning their attention to the people who knew Michelle. Detectives believed that most violent crimes were committed by someone familiar to the victim. They carefully studied her daily routine, her friendships, and her recent activities. Yearbooks were reviewed. Phone records were examined. Officers visited homes late into the night, asking careful questions and taking notes. Several young men who had shown interest in Michelle were brought in for questioning. Some had gone to school with her. Others had briefly crossed paths with her at social events. Detectives looked for signs of jealousy, rejection, or hidden resentment. Each possibility was explored with seriousness and caution. Rumors quickly spread among students, creating tension and suspicion in hallways and classrooms. But every lead seemed to collapse under closer inspection. Alibis were checked and confirmed. Fingerprints collected from the car did not clearly match anyone in the system at the time. Investigators searched for the murder weapon, but never recovered it. Without a confession or physical evidence tying someone directly to the scene, the case remained frustratingly out of reach. The longer the investigation continued, the more complicated it became. Tips poured in from the public, some helpful, many misleading. Anonymous calls accused innocent people. Old grudges resurfaced. Detectives had to separate truth from rumor while trying to stay focused on facts. Months turned into years. The original energy of the case slowly faded as other crimes demanded attention. For Michelle's family, however, nothing faded. They lived each day with unanswered questions. While the town adjusted to a new normal, the mystery of who had taken her life remained unsolved, hanging quietly over the community like a shadow that refused to disappear. The years moved forward, but the case stood still. By the mid-1980s, new headlines had replaced the old ones, and the urgency that once filled the police station had softened into quiet frustration. The detectives who first worked the scene were reassigned, transferred, or retired. A thick file containing reports, photographs, and lab results was placed into storage, labeled but unresolved. Every few years, someone reopened the file, hoping to see something others had missed. Fresh eyes scanned the same crime scene photos. Notes were reread line by line. Small details that once seemed unimportant were reconsidered. Yet each review ended the same way, with questions but no answers. Technology, at the time, was limited. Fingerprint databases were not as advanced, and DNA science was still in its early stages. Evidence collected from the car was carefully preserved, but it could not yet reveal the identity of the attacker. Detectives often wondered if the person responsible was living nearby, watching the years pass with quiet relief. For Michelle's family, time did not heal the wound. Birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries were painful reminders of what had been lost. Each December brought media attention back to the case, reopening emotional scars. The community remembered, even if daily life continued. As the 1990s approached, the case was officially labeled cold. It did not mean it was forgotten. It meant there were no active leads strong enough to pursue. Somewhere, the truth existed, hidden in a single missing piece of evidence. The silence surrounding the investigation grew heavy. The killer had managed to disappear into ordinary life, while a family continued waiting for justice that seemed further away with each passing year. By the early 2000s, forensic science had changed in ways investigators in 1979 could never have imagined. Across the country, cold cases were being reopened as new DNA methods revealed answers hidden for decades. Detectives in Cedar Rapids began to wonder if Michelle's case could finally benefit from these advances. The evidence collected from her car had been carefully preserved, stored in sealed containers inside the police department's evidence room. What once seemed too small or damaged to analyze was now considered valuable. Specialists re-examined the items using modern technology. Tiny biological traces were extracted and sent to advanced laboratories. Weeks passed as scientists worked carefully to build a complete DNA profile. When the results came back, investigators felt a cautious sense of hope. For the first time, they had something solid that could belong to the killer. The DNA profile was entered into national criminal databases. Officers waited for a match, expecting the system to quickly identify a suspect. But no name appeared. The killer had either never been arrested before, or his DNA was not on file. The disappointment was heavy, but detectives refused to give up. That was when they turned to a newer technique known as genetic genealogy. Instead of searching for an exact match, this method looked for distant relatives who had voluntarily shared their DNA through public ancestry databases. Experts began building a family tree based on partial matches. It was slow, detailed work that required patience and precision. As branches of the family tree expanded, investigators narrowed the possibilities. After decades of silence, the science was finally speaking. A path was forming, pointing quietly toward a name that had never before been connected to the case. As genetic experts carefully build out the family tree, investigators began narrowing their focus to a small group of possible individuals. The process required patience. Each branch of the tree represented generations of relatives, cousins, marriages, and distant connections. Detectives studied birth records, old addresses, employment histories, and yearbooks. They looked for someone who had lived in or near Cedar Rapids in 1979 and who fit the likely age range of the attacker. One name slowly moved to the top of the list. He had been a young man at the time of the crime. Records showed he lived within driving distance of them all. There was nothing in his past that clearly pointed to violence. He had worked regular jobs, paid his bills, and blended into everyday life. To neighbors and co-workers, he appeared ordinary. Over the years, he built a routine that drew no attention. Investigators watched him quietly. They avoided alerting him while they gathered more information. Surveillance teams followed his movements. They observed his habits, looking for an opportunity to collect an item he had discarded in public. A simple object left behind could hold the final answer. Eventually, officers retrieved a piece of trash he had thrown away. It was sent to the lab for testing. The wait for results felt heavy, even though decades had already passed. When the lab confirmed that the DNA matched the profile taken from Michelle's car, the long search reached a turning point. After nearly 40 years, the unknown attacker was no longer hidden behind mystery. Science had uncovered what time had tried to bury. The quiet life he had built was about to collapse under the weight of the truth. When investigators felt certain about the DNA match, they prepared carefully for the arrest. Nearly 4 decades had passed since the night in the parking lot, and the suspect had grown older, with gray hair and a quiet routine. Few people in his neighborhood could imagine that he was connected to one of the city's most haunting unsolved crimes. To many, he seemed like an ordinary man who had lived a calm and private life. Police officers moved in without warning. The arrest was carried out swiftly, ending years of uncertainty in a single moment. News of the breakthrough spread across the community within hours. Residents who remembered the fear of 1979 were stunned. Younger generations, who only knew the case from old news stories, were shocked that it had finally been solved. Investigators revealed that the suspect had never been on their original radar. His name had not appeared in early interviews or tips. He had quietly existed outside the circle of suspicion while detectives chased other leads. The DNA evidence became the central focus of the case, linking him directly to the crime scene after decades of silence. As details emerged, one question remained unclear. Why Michelle? There was no confirmed personal connection between them. Many experts believe the attack was random, a sudden act of violence carried out in a moment of opportunity. That possibility made the crime even more chilling. For Michelle's family, the arrest brought a mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice was finally moving forward, but it could not return the years that had been lost. The long wait for answers was ending, and the case that once seemed forgotten was now heading toward its final chapter in court. The trial marked the final stage of a journey that had lasted nearly 40 years. Inside the courtroom, the past and the present came together. Evidence collected in 1979 was carefully presented alongside modern scientific findings. Old photographs, preserved reports, and forensic samples told the story of that winter night. What had once seemed impossible to solve was now explained through clear and detailed DNA analysis. Jurors listened closely as experts described how genetic genealogy led investigators to the suspect. The science was complex, but its conclusion was simple. The biological evidence taken from Michelle's car matched the man sitting in the courtroom. Decades of mystery were reduced to undeniable facts. For Michelle's family, every day of the trial reopened painful memories. They had waited through years of silence, unsure if they would ever see accountability. The courtroom became a place of both grief and strength. While nothing could erase the loss, the process offered a sense of long-delayed justice. When the verdict was announced, it brought a quiet but powerful closure to the case. The guilty finding confirmed what science had uncovered. The sentence ensured that the man responsible would face consequences for the crime that had haunted a community for generations. Michelle's story became more than a tragedy. It became a reminder that time does not protect the truth forever. Advances in forensic technology continue to uncover answers hidden for decades. Her case showed that even when hope feels distant, persistence and science can work together to bring justice. The lights of that long-ago December night may have faded, but the search for truth never truly ended.